I bought shoes for a poor student and got fired from my job. What happened next shocked me. The whistle hanging around my neck has been my companion for 15 years now. Some days it feels heavier than others, especially when we lose a big game or when a kid I've been working with for months just can't get their form right. But most days, that whistle represents the best decision I ever made. I'm Jason Miller, just your average high school coach from Pinewood, Michigan, a town so small we got exactly one traffic light and 3 restaurants worth mentioning. I teach physical education and coach the boys' basketball team at Pinewood High School, home of the mighty Timberwolves, though mighty might be stretching it in recent seasons. My salary is nothing to write home about. Last year, I cleared just under $48,000, which is barely enough to keep up with the payments on my modest 3-bedroom ranch house and my 2015 Ford F-150. But here's the thing. I've never once regretted my career choice. There's something about watching a kid who couldn't make a layup in September sink a 3-pointer in February that hits different. Not just because it means we might actually win a few games, but because you can literally see their confidence transform before your eyes. When Tommy Schultz finally made that free throw after missing 17 straight in practice, the way his face lit up was worth more than any corner office or company car my siblings flaunt at family gatherings. Speaking of family gatherings, last Thursday was Thanksgiving, and like every year, it was held at my parents' place in Grand Rapids. I brought my famous buffalo chicken dip, which is literally just Frank's red-hot cream cheese and rotisserie chicken mixed together, but everyone acts like I'm some culinary genius when I show up with it. The moment I walked through the door, I could feel it starting, that subtle current of judgment that flows through every Miller family gathering. There was my brother Andrew, standing in the living room telling a story about some high-profile case he just won. His Italian leather shoes probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, and he makes sure everyone knows it without directly saying so. He's been with the same prestigious law firm in Chicago for 12 years now, making the kind of money that lets him take skiing trips to Aspen and send his kids to private schools where they learn Mandarin in 1st grade. And then there's my sister Emily, who started a meal prep delivery service in Detroit right when the pandemic hit. Talk about perfect timing. She's now expanded to 3 states and was recently featured in Entrepreneur magazine. She showed up in her Tesla, wearing a blazer that screamed, "I'm important," her Apple Watch pinging every 2 minutes with urgent business matters that simply couldn't wait. Meanwhile, there I was in my Pinewood High quarter zip that was starting to peel around the elbows, nursing the same beer for an hour because I had a 7 a.m. practice the next morning. Dinner started out pleasant enough. Mom made her traditional spread, turkey, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole with those crispy onions on top that everyone fights over. Dad carved the turkey like he was performing surgery, making the same jokes about finding the wishbone that he's been making since I was 10. It was when we got to dessert that things took their usual turn. So Jason, my mother began serving me a slice of pumpkin pie that was definitely smaller than the one she gave Andrew. Any exciting developments with the team this year? Before I could even answer, Andrew jumped in. Mom, come on. It's high school basketball in Pinewood. The most exciting development would be if the scoreboard actually worked for a full game. Everyone laughed, even my parents. Well, actually, we got a really promising point guard this year. I started to say, but Emily cut me off. Jason, I've been meaning to ask you, have you ever thought about going into sports management? My friend Stephanie's husband made the switch from coaching to the business side, and now he's working with the Detroit Pistons marketing team. I could introduce you. I took a deep breath. I appreciate that, Em, but I'm happy where I am. My father put down his fork, giving me that look he perfected over the years. A mixture of disappointment and confusion. Son, you're 42 years old. Don't you think it's time to pursue something with more growth potential? Dad, I have growth potential. I'm up for department head next year. Andrew snorted. Department head of PE at Pinewood High. Wow. Will that come with a $5 raise and a new whistle? More laughter. My mother tried to soften the blow. We just worry about your future. Honey, your retirement. You should be thinking about these things at your age. I wanted to tell them that I think about my future every single day, that I've seen what success has done to both Andrew and Emily, the 3 divorces between them, The kids who barely know them because they're always working, the subtle lines of stress etched into their faces despite the expensive skincare routines they both religiously follow. Instead, I just nodded and changed the subject to the Lions' chances this season, which is always a safe move in a Michigan household when you want to divert attention. The rest of the evening played out like a bad rerun of every family gathering for the past decade. Andrew bragged about his recent vacation to the Maldives. Emily showed everyone pictures of her new vacation home on Lake Michigan. My parents beamed with pride, and when it was time to leave, my mother hugged me a little too long, as if trying to transfer her own ambition into me through osmosis. "We just want to see you succeed, Jason," she whispered. I wanted to tell her that I do succeed, every day, in ways that don't show up on a W-2 or translate to a luxury car. Instead, I just hug her back and promise to come by for Sunday dinner soon. The drive back to Pinewood that night was quiet, just me and my thoughts on the dark highway. I try not to let their words get to me, but they always do, settling in my chest like a cold weight. In their eyes, I'd never be a success story, just a small-town coach who never reached his potential. The next morning, I arrived at the gym earlier than usual, needing the familiar echo of bouncing basketballs to clear my head. Our first game of the season was coming up, and despite what my family thought, it mattered. It mattered to me, and it mattered to the kids who showed up every day ready to work. Practice started at 7 sharp. The team filed in, looking like zombies at that hour, but they got to work immediately, all except for one. Tyler Jensen wasn't there. Tyler was our star, a 6'2" junior, with the kind of natural talent coaches dream about. He had a three-point shot that was nearly automatic and court vision that made even opposing coaches shake their heads in disbelief. College scouts were already showing interest, and I had no doubt he could go D1 with the right development. But more than his athletic abilities, Tyler was reliable, never missed practice, always first to arrive, last to leave. As the other boys ran drills, I checked my phone. No messages from Tyler or his parents. I sent a quick text asking if everything was okay, but got no response. When he didn't show up for his PE class later that day, the concern I'd been feeling turned to genuine worry. This wasn't like him at all. Something was definitely off. After school, I checked the attendance records. Tyler hadn't shown up for any of his classes today. This wasn't just skipping practice. He'd missed a whole day. In the 3 years I'd known him, Tyler had never missed a single day without his mother calling the office first. I tried calling his mother during my planning period, but the call went straight to voicemail. I left a message expressing my concern and asking her to reach out when she could. No response. By the end of the day, I'd asked around to Tyler's other teachers. None of them had heard anything either. Mrs. Peterson, his English teacher, mentioned that he'd seemed distracted during yesterday's class, not participating like he usually did. Tyler wasn't just my star player. He was a good kid, respectful, hard-working, the kind who stayed after practice to help put equipment away without being asked. His basketball scholarship was practically guaranteed if he kept on his current path. Colleges were already expressing interest, and he was only a junior. Something about this didn't add up. Tyler loved basketball more than anything. It was his ticket out of our small town, and he knew it. For him to just not show up, something had to be seriously wrong. I sat in my empty office, staring at the team photo on my wall. Tyler stood in the center, trophy in hand from last season's regional championship, a genuine smile on his face. Whatever was happening, I couldn't just let it go. After everything I'd endured with my family, their constant reminders that I was just a small-town coach who'd never achieved real success, maybe this was a sign. Maybe this was where I could make a difference in a way my lawyer brother or entrepreneur sister never could, not with money or status, but with genuine care for a kid who needed help. I grabbed my keys and my jacket. The grade reports and practice plans could wait. Tomorrow, I'd find out what was really going on with Tyler, even if I had to drive to his house before school started. Something told me this wasn't just normal teenage drama or a sudden loss of interest in basketball. Whatever was happening with Tyler, I was going to get to the bottom of it. Sometimes being just a coach meant being the only adult willing to look deeper when something was wrong. Maybe that's what Tyler needed right now, not a coach, but someone who actually cared. I barely slept that night. My mind kept circling back to Tyler, the team star who'd suddenly vanished without explanation. By the time my alarm went off at 5:30 a.m., I'd already been staring at the ceiling for an hour, running through different scenarios of what might be happening with him. I decided to skip my usual morning routine of ESPN and coffee. Instead, I threw on a Pinewood Timberwolves hoodie and jeans, grabbed my keys, and headed out while the sky was still dark. If I was going to catch Tyler before school, I needed to be at his house early. The Jensen family lived in the older part of town, where the houses were smaller and the yards less manicured. Most people in Pinewood didn't even know this neighborhood existed. They stuck to the main streets with the Starbucks and the Target. But coaching at the high school for 15 years meant I knew every corner of our little town and exactly where my players came from. As I pulled up to the modest split level with peeling paint and a basketball hoop mounted above the garage, I noticed the lights were already on inside. The driveway was empty except for an older model Civic that had definitely seen better days. It was just after 6:30 a.m. when I knocked on the door. I heard movement inside, and after a moment, a woman in nurse's scrubs opened it, looking surprised to see me standing there. Ms. Jensen worked the night shift at Pinewood Community Hospital. I'd met her a few times at parent-teacher conferences, always impressed by how she managed to show up despite her grueling schedule. She was a single mom doing everything she could to give Tyler a shot at something better. She recognized me immediately. The worry lines on her face deepened as she invited me inside. Their living room was small, but impeccably clean. Photos of Tyler through the years lined the walls, most of them basketball-related. Tyler holding his first basketball as a toddler. Tyler in his middle school uniform. Tyler with last year's regional championship trophy. This was a home where basketball mattered. When I asked about Tyler, Ms. Jensen's eyes darted toward the hallway. She explained that he was in his room and had barely come out since yesterday. She'd been working double shifts all week and hadn't been able to get him to open up about what was wrong. With her permission, I headed down the narrow hallway to Tyler's room. The door was closed, with a faded poster of LeBron James taped to it. I knocked softly. No response. I knocked again, a little louder this time, and identified myself. After a long pause, I heard shuffling inside, followed by the click of the lock turning. The door opened just enough for me to see Tyler's face. He looked like he hadn't slept either. His eyes were red-rimmed, and his usual confident posture was gone, replaced by hunched shoulders and a lowered gaze that wouldn't meet mine. Ms. Jensen had left for her shift by the time Tyler finally let me into his room. It was exactly what you'd expect from a basketball-obsessed teenager. Team posters on the walls, a small TV with a gaming console, a desk cluttered with school books, and a bed that wasn't made. But what caught my eye was the open gym bag on the floor, his Timberwolves jersey stuffed inside, alongside a pair of basketball shoes that were literally falling apart at the seams. And that's when it hit me. The shoes. They were the same ones he'd been wearing all last season. We sat in awkward silence for a few minutes, me on his desk chair, him on the edge of his bed, until I finally broke the ice by commenting on the Lakers game from the night before. Basketball was our common language, and slowly he started to open up. It turned out I was right about the shoes, but that was just the beginning. Tyler hadn't just outgrown last year's gear. It was completely worn out. The soles of his shoes were so thin, he could feel every step on the court. His practice shorts had been mended so many times the stitches were giving out. And this year, the team was requiring new compression gear that cost nearly $85. Mom's been picking up extra shifts, Tyler explained, finally looking me in the eye. But the car needed repairs last month, and then our heating bill was crazy high. She told me we'd have to wait until her next paycheck for the new gear. But waiting wasn't an option. Our first game was in less than 2 weeks, and team photos were scheduled for Monday. Tyler had been enduring the sideways glances and whispered comments from some of the other players about his worn-out gear. He'd brushed it off all last season, but now with college scouts starting to show interest, the pressure was different. I just couldn't do it anymore, coach, he said. Show up looking like I can't even afford the basics. Everyone will know where you know. Poor, the word he couldn't bring himself to say. I thought about my own family's Thanksgiving dinner, about how my brother Andrew had casually mentioned dropping $500 on a bottle of wine for a client dinner like it was nothing. Meanwhile, here was one of the most talented players I'd ever coached, ready to throw away his future because he couldn't afford an $85 compression shirt and some decent shoes. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was a family disappointment because I was just a coach with a modest salary, but that modest salary was still enough that I could help this kid right now. I told Tyler I'd see him at practice that afternoon, no exceptions. He started to protest, but I cut him off with my non-negotiable coach voice that even the seniors didn't argue with. Then I drove straight to Dick's Sporting Goods the moment they opened at 9 a.m. I knew Tyler's sizes from ordering team uniforms. I grabbed everything he needed. Practice gear, compression shirt, shorts, new socks, and the piece de resistance, a pair of Nike Zoom Freak 5 that were on sale, but still set me back $130. The total came to just over $300, which was significant on my budget, but wouldn't break me. I figured I'd just eat ramen for the rest of the month. Wouldn't be the first time. Tyler showed up to practice that afternoon as instructed, though he mostly sat on the sidelines, claiming a twisted ankle that everyone, including me, knew was bogus. I let it slide. The plan was already in motion. After practice, I casually mentioned I needed to show him some game footage and asked him to stay behind. Once everyone else had cleared out, I pulled the Dick's Sporting Goods bag from my office closet and handed it to him. "What's this?" he asked, confused. "Equipment manager found some extra gear in storage." I lied. It's last year's order that never got claimed. School policy says we have to offer it to team members before donating it. Your name came up first on a roster. It was a terrible lie. Any decent equipment manager would have distributed extra gear months ago. But Tyler was desperate enough to believe it, or at least pretend he believed it. He peeked inside the bag, and I saw his eyes widen at the Nike shoebox. When he pulled out the shoes, something in my chest tightened. The look on his face, pure disbelief mixed with such raw gratitude, made every penny worth it. "Coach, I can't." "You can," I interrupted. "You will. And Tyler. Nobody needs to know where it came from. It's just between us." He nodded, understanding immediately. In a small town like Pinewood, pride was sometimes all a family had. If word got out that the coach was buying gear for Tyler Jensen because his family couldn't afford it, the embarrassment would be worse than not having the gear in the first place. We agreed he'd start wearing the new gear on Monday, and he'd just tell anyone who asked that his mom had surprised him with it. A simple plan. Foolproof, even, or so I thought. Saturday morning, I was back at the school for a coaching clinic I'd organized for the middle school teams. It was a way to build our program from the ground up, getting younger kids excited about playing for the Timberwolves someday. The gym was full of 6th, 7th, and 8th graders dribbling basketballs and shooting with varying degrees of success. I didn't notice Tyler come in. He wasn't scheduled to help at the clinic, but he often showed up anyway. This time, he'd come to show me something on his phone, a college recruitment email that had him excited. He was wearing his new Nikes. I stepped away from a group I was working with to check out Tyler's phone. We were standing by the bleachers, partially hidden from view, when he reached into his backpack and pulled out a small package. "Got this for you, Coach," he said, handing it to me. "Just a thank you." It was a Timberwolves keychain, nothing fancy, probably cost less than $10 at the school store. But the gesture knocked me sideways. This kid, who barely had enough for basic gear, had spent his lunch money on a gift for me. I thanked him, we bumped fists, and he headed out. What neither of us realized was that Gary Prescott had witnessed the entire exchange from the doorway. Gary Prescott was a nightmare of a parent, the kind who thought his son was the next LeBron James despite all evidence to the contrary. His son, Mason, was a decent enough player, but nowhere near Tyler's level, which had been a source of tension all season. Gary was also on the school board and never let anyone forget it. I didn't even realize Gary had seen us until later that weekend, when my phone buzzed with a text from another coach who'd also been at the clinic. "Heads up, Prescott was running his mouth at the Pinewood Diner this morning. Something about you showing favoritism to Tyler Jensen. Might want to prepare for some drama on Monday." My stomach dropped. In a town the size of Pinewood. Rumors moved faster than our point guard on a fast break. By tomorrow, that conversation at the diner would reach at least half the parents, 3 school board members, and probably Principal Reeves. I tried calling Gary directly, hoping to explain the situation, but he sent me straight to voicemail. Not a good sign. The rest of Sunday, I kept checking my phone, expecting a call from the principal or an angry text from one of the other parents. Nothing came, which somehow made the anxiety worse. It was like watching a storm gather on the horizon, knowing it was headed straight for you, but being unable to do anything except wait. Monday morning arrived with clear skies and a crisp November chill. I got to school early, as usual, hoping to catch Principal Reeves before the day started to get ahead of whatever Gary Prescott might be planning. As I walked toward the main entrance, I spotted Tyler stepping out of his mom's Civic. He was wearing his new Nikes and carrying the gym bag with all the new gear. He looked like a different person, shoulders back, head up, ready to take on the world. For a moment, watching him stride confidently toward the school doors, I thought maybe it was all worth it, whatever storm was coming my way. Then I saw Gary Prescott's SUV pull into the visitors' parking spot right in front of the school, and I knew the storm had arrived. He didn't even glance my way as he marched up the steps and to the front doors, heading straight for the main office where Principal Reeves would be starting her day. Whatever was about to happen, I had a feeling my simple act of kindness was about to turn into the biggest scandal Pinewood High had seen in years, and that both Tyler's future and mine now hung in the balance. I spent first period in a daze, tried to focus on teaching freshman P while my mind kept drifting to Gary Prescott marching into the principal's office. The knot in my stomach tightened with each passing minute. By the time the bell rang, my inbox showed what I was dreading, an email from Principal Reeves requesting my immediate presence in her office. The walk down the main hallway felt like the longest of my life. Students rushed past, laughing and gossiping, completely unaware that my 15-year career might be imploding. I nodded mechanically at a few colleagues, hoping my face didn't betray the anxiety churning inside me. Principal Sandra Reeves had been running Pinewood High for almost a decade. She was fair but no nonsense, the kind of administrator who followed the rule book to the letter. As I entered her office, I immediately noticed she wasn't alone. Gary Prescott sat in one of the chairs across from her desk, looking smug in his golf polo and khakis. Next to him was Deborah Winters, the school district's legal counsel. My heart sank. Principal Reeves gestured for me to sit in the remaining chair. The atmosphere in the room was so tense you could have cut it with a knife. She began by explaining that Mr. Prescott had come to her with serious concerns about my conduct as a coach. The formal language and her refusal to meet my eyes told me everything I needed to know about how this meeting was going to go. Gary launched into his version of events, painting a picture that made my simple act of kindness sound like some kind of sinister favoritism. According to him, I was creating an unfair environment by providing expensive equipment to my favorite player while other team members, including his son, had to purchase their own gear. He claimed he had witnessed an exchange between Tyler and me that looked highly suspicious. When I tried to explain the reality of the situation, that Tyler's family couldn't afford the equipment, that I had acted out of genuine concern for a student in need, Gary scoffed loudly. He suggested that if Tyler's family couldn't afford the gear, perhaps basketball wasn't the right extracurricular for him. The casual cruelty of a statement left me speechless. Principal Reeves, to her credit, seemed uncomfortable with Gary's tone, but the district lawyer was already taking notes and asking pointed questions about school policy. Did I understand the district's rules about gifts to students? Was I aware of the policy on treating all team members equally? Had I documented Tyler's financial need through proper channels before taking action? The answer to all these questions was no. I hadn't followed procedure. I hadn't documented anything. I'd simply seen a kid in trouble and tried to help. When I explained that I had purchased equipment with my own money, the situation somehow got worse. Ms. Winters pointed out that this could be interpreted as an inappropriate personal interest in a student. The implication made my blood boil, but I forced myself to stay calm. Losing my temper would only make things worse. The meeting lasted nearly 2 hours. By the end, it was clear that no one in that room cared about my intentions or Tyler's well-being. All that mattered was liability, perception, and appeasing Gary Prescott, whose family had donated generously to the school's new science wing last year. Principal Reeves dismissed Gary and the lawyer, asking me to stay behind. Once we were alone, her professional facade cracked slightly. She'd known me for years, had seen the positive impact I'd had on countless students. But her hands were tied. The school board would be meeting that evening in an emergency session to discuss the situation. Until then, I was being placed on administrative leave. I had to surrender my keys, gather my personal belongings, and leave the premises immediately. The basketball team would be coached by my assistant for that afternoon's practice. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. 15 years of dedication, of early mornings and late nights, of mentoring troubled kids, of celebrating victories and consoling defeats, all of it reduced to this moment of humiliation. As I emptied my desk into a cardboard box, news of what had happened spread to the school like wildfire. A few teachers stopped by to offer awkward words of support, but most avoided eye contact in the hallway. Nobody wanted to be associated with the coach under investigation. The worst part was leaving without being able to explain anything to Tyler or the team. They would hear all kinds of rumors before I had a chance to tell my side of the story. The thought of Tyler believing I'd abandoned him made me sick. The drive home was a blur. My house, which had always been a sanctuary, now felt like a prison. I paced the living room for hours, alternating between rage at the injustice of it all and crushing anxiety about my future. How would I pay my mortgage if I lost my job permanently? Who would hire a coach with termination for inappropriate conduct on his record? My phone buzzed constantly with text messages from colleagues and friends who had heard what happened. I ignored most of them, not ready to rehash the details. But when my sister Emily's name flashed on the screen, I hesitated before answering. My family didn't know yet, and I wasn't looking forward to telling them. Emily's message was brief. Mom says you're not answering her calls. Everything okay? I hadn't even noticed my mother calling. With a deep sigh, I called her back, bracing myself for conversation. My mother, true to form, didn't waste time on pleasantries. She'd already heard about my situation from a friend whose daughter worked as a secretary at the district office. News traveled fast in small towns, especially bad news. I tried to explain what had happened, how I'd been trying to help a student in need, how the whole thing had been blown out of proportion. But before I could finish, she interrupted with a heavy sigh that spoke volumes. Oh, Jason, this is exactly what we were talking about at Thanksgiving. You're just too naive for your own good. Her words cut deeper than anything Gary Prescott or Principal Reeves had said. My own mother thought I deserved what was happening. I was just trying to help a kid, Mom, I said, hating how defensive I sounded. And look where that got you. This is why we worry about you. Honey, you don't think about the consequences. Your brother would have known better than to get involved like this. Of course, she'd bring Andrew into it. Successful, pragmatic Andrew, who would never risk his career to help someone less fortunate. The conversation went downhill from there. By the time I hung up, I felt worse than before. According to my mother, this situation proved everything they've been saying for years, that I lacked ambition and judgment, that my career choice was a mistake, that I needed to grow up and join the real world. I turned off my phone after that, unable to handle any more criticism or false sympathy. The evening stretched out endlessly ahead of me. I grabbed a beer from the fridge and slumped onto the couch, wondering how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. Around 8 p.m., the doorbell rang. I considered ignoring it, but it rang again more insistently. With a groan, I hauled myself off the couch and opened the door to find Ms. Jensen, Tyler's mom, standing on my porch. She was still in her hospital scrubs, her face drawn with exhaustion. I hadn't seen her since the morning I'd visited her house to talk to Tyler, and for a wild moment, I worried she was here to accuse me of something too. Instead, she surprised me by extending her hand, and it was an envelope. Tyler asked me to give you this, she said quietly. He wouldn't tell me what's going on, but I know it has something to do with those new shoes he suddenly has. I took the envelope, unsure what to say. Should I apologize? Explain? In the end, I simply thanked her. She nodded once and turned to go, but then paused. "Whatever you did for my son," she said without looking back. "Thank you. I haven't seen him hold his head up like that in months." After she left, I stood in the doorway for a long moment, the envelope heavy in my hand. Finally, I closed the door and sat down to read what Tyler had written. The letter was brief, written in the messy handwriting of a teenage boy not used to expressing his feelings on paper. He'd heard I was suspended because of the gear I'd given him. He felt terrible, like it was his fault. He wanted me to know that what I'd done meant more to him than I could ever understand. The last paragraph hit me like a truck. "Coach, everyone's saying you're not coming back. I don't know if that's true, but I want you to know I'm not going to waste what you did for me. I'm going to play harder than ever. I'm going to get that scholarship. And someday when I make it, I'm going to tell everyone it was because of you. I promise." I read the letter 3 times, my vision blurring with each pass. In the midst of the worst day of my professional life, this kid's words were the only thing that made any sense. The next morning arrived with harsh clarity. I checked my voicemail to find I was being called to a formal hearing that afternoon. The board wanted my account of events before making their final decision. I spent the morning preparing what I would say, rehearsing explanations that wouldn't sound like excuses. Around noon, my phone rang. It was Andrew, which was unusual. He typically sent texts rather than calling directly. "Mom, fill me in," he said without preamble. "You're in quite a mess, little brother." I sighed, bracing myself for the lecture I knew was coming. I was just trying to help a kid, Andrew. By breaking school policy and opening yourself up to all sorts of liability, this is exactly what I'm talking about when I say you don't think things through. His voice had that familiar patronizing tone he perfected since childhood. "Do you have any idea how this could affect your career if it gets out?" "It's already out." I said, my patience wearing thin. "The whole town probably knows by now. Which is exactly why you should have consulted someone like me before pulling a stunt like this. There are proper channels for helping students in need. Anonymous donations through the school foundation, scholarship funds. Ways that don't put your job at risk." Of course, he was right. There were proper channels. But those channels came with paperwork and committees and weeks of deliberation, while Tyler sat on the sidelines, embarrassed and losing his chance of being scouted. "What's done is done," I said. "The hearing is in 2 hours. You need a lawyer, Jason. This could get ugly. I can't afford a lawyer on my teacher's salary, as you well know." There was a pause, and for a brief moment, I thought he might offer his services. Instead, he sighed. "Well, I hope you've learned something from this. Sometimes being the hero isn't worth the cost." By the time I hung up, I felt worse than before. According to my brother, this situation confirmed everything they'd been saying for years, that I lacked ambition and judgment, that my career choice was a mistake, that I needed to grow up and join the real world. The hearing the next day was exactly as awful as I'd anticipated. The school board member sat behind a long table in the district office conference room, looking somber and uncomfortable. Principal Reeves was there, along with the district's lawyer. Gary Prescott sat in the corner, arms crossed smugly over his chest. I presented my case as best I could, explaining Tyler's situation and why I felt compelled to help. I emphasized that my intentions were purely to support a student-athlete in need, that there was nothing inappropriate about my actions aside from not following proper protocol. A few board members seemed sympathetic, particularly Elaine Rodriguez, who had been a teacher herself for over 20 years before joining the board. But others were clearly more concerned with liability and public perception than with doing right by a student. The deliberation took less than 30 minutes. When they called me back in, I could tell from their faces what the decision was before a word was spoken. "Mr. Miller," the board president began, not quite meeting my eyes, "while we appreciate your years of service to Pinewood High School and acknowledge your stated intentions in this matter, we cannot overlook the serious breach of district policy. Your actions, however well-intentioned, created an appearance of favoritism and circumvented established protocols for student assistance." The rest was bureaucratic language designed to soften the blow of what came next. I was being terminated, effective immediately. They would pay out the remainder of my contract, but I was no longer an employee of Pinewood School District. 15 years. Gone in 15 minutes. I drove home in a stupor, the reality of what had just happened not fully sinking in. My career was over, not just at Pinewood, but possibly everywhere. What school would hire a coach fired for inappropriate conduct involving a student, even if that conduct was nothing more than buying basketball shoes? My house felt emptier than ever when I returned. I had nowhere to be the next morning, no practice to plan, no games to strategize for. The silence was deafening. My phone had been buzzing nonstop since the news broke, but I ignored it all. I wasn't ready to face anyone's pity or judgment. Around dinner time, my sister Emily called, and for some reason I picked up. "I just heard," she said, her voice gentler than usual. "Mom's beside herself. She's been trying to reach you all day." "I'm sure she has," I replied flatly. Another chance to tell me what a disappointment I am. "That's not fair, Jason. She's worried about you." "We all are." I laughed, a harsh sound that surprised even me. "Worried? Or just having your 'I told you so' moment? This is exactly what you all predicted at Thanksgiving, isn't it? That my career was a dead end, that I wasn't living up to my potential. Well, congratulations. You were right. The job's gone." Emily was quiet for a moment. "Nobody wanted this, Jason." "No? Then where were you all when I was fighting for my job? Andrew's a hotshot lawyer. He could have helped if he wanted to, but he didn't. Because deep down, you all think I got what I deserve for being, what did Mom call it? Too naive for my own good." The conversation ended shortly after that, with Emily promising to check in tomorrow when I'd calmed down, as if this was just some tantrum that would pass. I sat alone in my darkening living room, staring at nothing in particular. Everything I'd worked for, everything I'd built, was gone. And for what? For trying to help a kid who needed it? The worst part was I couldn't even bring myself to regret what I'd done. If I had to do it all over again, knowing the outcome, I'd still buy those shoes for Tyler. The look on his face when he opened that bag was worth more than any job security. The realization hit me with unexpected clarity. Maybe my family was right about me being naive, but they were wrong about everything else. I wasn't a failure because I chose to be just a coach. I was a coach because I believed in something bigger than a paycheck or status. The potential to change lives. And maybe, just maybe, I'd change Tyler's life for the better, even if it had cost me my own career in the process. As I sat there in the growing darkness, I thought about Tyler's letter, about his promise to make something of himself. At least one good thing might come out of this mess. That had to count for something. 3 months after being fired, my life had settled into a depressing routine. Wake up, check job listings, send out resumes, get rejected, or worse, ignored, then spend the evening watching basketball games on TV with microwave dinner balance on my lap. Lather, rinse, repeat. I'd applied to every coaching position within a 100-mile radius, but word had spread about my inappropriate conduct. No one wanted to touch me with a 10-foot pole. I even tried applying for regular teaching jobs, only to be met with the same wall of silence. My savings were dwindling fast, and I'd started looking at listings for warehouse jobs and night security positions. Anything to keep the lights on. My family had mostly given up on calling after the first month. I think they were tired of my bitterness, and honestly, I was tired of their thinly veiled suggestions that I should have listened to them all along. Even my mother's check-ins had become less frequent. Her usual, "I told you so," undertone replaced with resigned acceptance that her middle child was destined to be the family disappointment. The only bright spot in this gloomy existence was following Pinewood's basketball season from afar. Through former colleagues who still spoke to me, I learned that Tyler had stepped up in a major way after my departure. He was averaging 22 points per game and had led the Timberwolves to a perfect record so far, attracting scouts from multiple Division I colleges. I took a small, petty satisfaction in knowing that Gary Prescott's son remained firmly planted on the bench despite Daddy's influence. It was a Wednesday morning in February when everything changed. I was in my usual spot on the couch, half-heartedly scrolling through job listings while SportsCenter played in the background, When I heard a familiar name, that made me look up. There on my TV screen was Tyler Jensen, surrounded by reporters in the Pinewood High gym. The cheering at the bottom of the screen identified him as high school basketball phenom. He looked taller somehow, more confident, those Nike Zoom Freak 5 still on his feet, though considerably more worn than when I'd given them to him. I fumbled for the remote to turn up the volume, catching a reporter mid-question about Tyler's incredible season and the upcoming state championship. Tyler answered with a poise that surprised me, talking about the team's hard work and dedication. But then the reporter asked what had sparked his transformation this season, what had turned him from a good player into a state-level star. What happened next left me frozen in place, the mug of cold coffee forgotten in my hand. Tyler looked directly into the camera and said my name. He explained how I'd noticed he was struggling, how I'd helped him when he couldn't afford equipment, and how my getting fired for that simple act of kindness had motivated him to prove that my sacrifice wasn't in vain. Coach Miller taught me that sometimes doing the right thing comes with a cost, he said, but that doesn't make it any less right. Everything I'm doing now is as much for him as it is for me. The reporter, clearly seeing a juicy angle, pressed for more details. Tyler didn't hold back. He laid out the whole story, his family's financial struggles, my purchasing the gear, the complaint from Gary Prescott, and my subsequent firing. He was careful to emphasize that there had never been anything inappropriate about my help, just a coach looking out for a player who needed it. If that's something worth firing someone over, Tyler concluded, then there's something seriously wrong with our priorities. I sat there stunned, watching as social media handles appeared on screen, encouraging viewers to share their thoughts with the hashtag Justice for Coach Miller. This kid, who had every reason to distance himself from my controversy, was instead putting himself right in the middle of it, risking his own reputation for me. My phone started buzzing almost immediately. Former players, colleagues, even a few parents from Pinewood texting to say they'd seen the interview and had no idea what had really happened. By noon, the local news had picked up the story. By dinner, it had gone regional. I didn't know whether to be grateful or mortified. On one hand, Tyler was clearing my name. On the other, he was forcing me to relive the most humiliating experience of my professional life on a much larger stage. The next day brought an even bigger surprise. ESPN's Outside the Lines featured a segment on the story, interviewing several sports psychologists and youth coaches about the pressure on student-athletes from low-income backgrounds and a lack of support systems in place. They didn't mention me by name, but it was clear they were referencing my situation with Tyler. By Friday, 3 days after Tyler's interview, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Normally, I let it go to voicemail, probably just another bill collector, but something told me to answer this time. "Is this Jason Miller?" A woman's voice asked when I picked up. I confirmed that it was. "Warily, this is Dana Nichols from Nike's Community Impact Team. We've been following Tyler Jensen's story with great interest, and we'd like to meet with you. Are you available for lunch tomorrow?" I nearly dropped the phone. Nike? Wanting to meet with me? It had to be a prank. Maybe Gary Prescott, finding a new way to torment me. But it wasn't a prank. The next day, I found myself sitting across from Dana Nichols and Marcus Washington, two polished corporate types from Nike's regional office, at the nicest restaurant in Pinewood, which, admittedly, isn't saying much. After some small talk, they got straight to the point. Tyler's story had caught their attention, not just because he was a promising basketball talent wearing their shoes, but because his situation highlighted a gap they'd been looking to address. Talented young athletes from underprivileged backgrounds who couldn't afford the basic equipment needed to develop their skills. "We've been developing a national initiative," Dana explained, spreading glossy mock-ups across the table. "Equal play, equipping tomorrow's champions. The concept is simple. Identify talented young athletes who face financial barriers and provide them with the gear they need, no strings attached." I nodded, impressed, but confused about why they were sharing this with me. Marcus leaned forward. "We need someone to run this program, Jason. Someone who understands both the sports world and the delicate nature of helping kids in need. Someone who's demonstrated they're willing to put a young athlete's future ahead of their own career." It took me a moment to realize what they were saying. "You want me?" They nodded in unison. Your situation with Tyler Jensen demonstrated exactly the qualities we're looking for, Dana said. Compassion, judgment, discretion. Well, mostly, she added with a small smile. Most importantly, you recognized a need and took action, even at personal cost. The job they outlined was beyond anything I could have imagined. I would be responsible for developing and implementing the Equal Play Initiative nationwide, with a six-figure salary, benefits, and relocation to Nike's headquarters in Oregon. I'd work with schools, youth organizations, and sports leagues to identify deserving athletes and get them the equipment they needed. It was a dream job I never even knew existed. A chance to do on a massive scale exactly what I'd done for Tyler. Help talented kids overcome financial barriers to achieve their potential. Why me, though? I asked, still struggling to process it all. I'm just a small-town high school coach who got fired. There must be hundreds of more qualified candidates. Marcus and Dana exchanged looks. Actually, Marcus said, that's exactly why we want you. This program isn't about corporate credentials or fancy degrees. It's about understanding what these kids are going through and having the courage to act. You've demonstrated that in the real world, not in a job interview. Dana slid a business card across the table. We don't need an answer today. Think about it, talk to your family, and call me on Monday. I walked out of that restaurant in a daze, the business card feeling like it was burning a hole in my pocket. Was this really happening? Or was I going to wake up on my couch, surrounded by job rejection emails? When I got home, I sat in my car for a long time, staring at nothing in particular. The irony wasn't lost on me. 3 months ago, I was being fired for giving a kid a pair of shoes. Now, I was being offered a job to do the same thing nationwide, with Nike's backing and resources. I thought about calling my family, sharing the news with them. Would they finally see that my path hadn't been a mistake after all? Would Andrew admit that sometimes being naive enough to help someone without calculating the personal benefit could lead to unexpected rewards? But something held me back. This moment felt too personal, too validating to share just yet. I needed time to process it myself before facing their reactions. Instead, I drove to the Jensen's house. Tyler's mom answered the door, surprised but pleased to see me. Tyler was at practice, but she invited me in anyway. The house looked the same as it had 3 months ago, but there were new photos on the wall, newspaper clippings of Tyler's recent games, a framed jersey from the regional all-star team. He talks about you all the time, Ms. Jensen said as she poured me a cup of coffee. Says he wouldn't be where he is now if you hadn't believed in him. I told her about the Nike offer, watching her eyes widen in disbelief and then fill with tears. That's wonderful, Jason, and so deserved. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Will you take it? It was the first time anyone had asked what I wanted, rather than telling me what I should do. I realized I hadn't actually considered my answer yet, too caught up in the shock of the offer itself. I think I will, I said, surprising myself at how right it felt. It's a chance to help other kids like Tyler. She nodded, understanding completely. He'll be sad to see you go, but so proud to know what he helped make happen. As I drove home, I thought about how strange life could be. 3 months ago, I was at the lowest point of my life, fired and humiliated for trying to help one student. Now, because of that very student, I was being offered the opportunity to help thousands. Sometimes, it seemed, the universe had a way of balancing the scales when you least expected it. My phone buzzed with text as I pulled into my driveway. It was from Tyler. Just got home. Mom told me about Nike. That's epic, Coach. Told you everything happened for a reason. I smiled, the first genuine smile in months. The kid wasn't wrong. Monday couldn't come fast enough. I had a phone call to make, and for the first time in a long time, I was excited about what came next. 5 years can change everything. That Monday morning when I called Dana Nichols to accept Nike's offer feels like both yesterday and a lifetime ago. What started as a simple program to help underprivileged athletes access equipment has evolved into something I never could have imagined back in my small Pinewood High gym. The Equal Play Initiative exploded across the country within the first year. We partner with over 500 schools in disadvantaged areas, providing gear to kids who show promise but lacked resources. The stories at Portland were heartbreaking and inspiring in equal measure. Young athletes sleeping on floors but dominating on basketball courts, track stars training in worn-out shoes, football players sharing equipment between 3 or 4 kids. By year 2, we'd expanded to include mentorship programs, connecting these kids with college athletes and pros who come from similar backgrounds. Nike's marketing team suggested we document some of these success stories, which turned into a documentary series that caught fire on social media. Suddenly, I was being invited onto sports talk shows, morning news programs, and podcasts to talk about the initiative. The irony wasn't lost on me. After 15 years of coaching with barely a mention in the local paper, I was now a regular on ESPN, discussing youth sports access like I was some kind of expert. My face appeared in Nike ads alongside professional athletes, all of us talking about the coaches who changed our lives. The transition from small-town coach to corporate executive wasn't always smooth. I still showed up to meetings in Nikes and khakis, while everyone else wore designer suits. I still said exactly what I thought instead of wrapping it in corporate jargon. But that authenticity became my trademark. People trusted me because I was still just a coach at heart, even if my office was now in Nike headquarters instead of high school gym. In year 3, Nike suggested I develop my own line of coaching gear, affordable essentials with a portion of proceeds going back into the Equal Play Fund. The Coach Miller collection wasn't exactly Air Jordans, but seeing my name on a product line sold in stores nationwide was surreal. The bestseller, ironically, was a pair of basketball shoes called the Mentors, inspired by the ones I bought for Tyler all those years ago. The book deal came next. More Than a Game, How Coaches Change Lives, debuted at number 3 on the New York Times bestseller list, which still feels like some kind of clerical error. I'm not a writer. I'm just a guy who cares about kids and sports. But apparently that resonated with people tired of hearing from celebrities and billionaires about how to succeed. The speaking circuit followed, with schools and corporations paying surprisingly large sums to hear me talk about mentorship, resilience, and taking chances on people. I always felt slightly fraudulent. What did I know about corporate leadership? But audiences seemed to connect with my story of failure and unexpected redemption. Through it all, I kept tabs on Tyler. He'd earned that Division I scholarship, playing for Michigan State and majoring in education. He was planning to be a coach himself after graduation. We texted occasionally, but both of us were busy with our new lives. Amid all this unexpected success, my family's attitude underwent a dramatic shift. My mother, who once questioned my career choice at every opportunity, now proudly told her friends about her son, working with Nike. Andrew started calling for advice on sports investments. Emily wanted introductions to celebrities for her meal prep business. It came to a head at Christmas dinner, 3 years after I'd taken a Nike job. We were back at my parents' house, the same place where they'd all mocked my coaching career at that fateful Thanksgiving. Andrew was in the middle of asking if I could get signed merchandise for one of his clients when I finally hit my limit. I set down my fork and looked around the table at my family, all of them suddenly interested in my life now that it came with status and connections. I reminded them, as calmly as I could, about that Thanksgiving dinner when they'd all made it clear how little they thought of my career choice, about how not one of them had offered genuine support when I lost my job trying to help a kid, about how they'd been right all along that I was naive, but wrong that it was something to be ashamed of. The table fell silent. My mother looked down at her plate. Andrew cleared his throat uncomfortably. Only my father spoke up, surprising everyone. "You're right, son," he said simply. "We were wrong, and I'm sorry." It wasn't a Hollywood moment of tearful reconciliation. There was no group hug or dramatic forgiveness. But it was something real, an acknowledgement that sometimes the paths we criticize are the ones that lead to the most meaningful places. Our family dynamic has improved since then. Not perfect, but better. They still don't fully understand why I do what I do, but they've stopped questioning its value. Last month marked the 5-year anniversary of the Equal Play Initiative. Nike organized a gala event in Chicago to celebrate, flying in kids from across the country who had benefited from the program. Many were now in college on athletic scholarships, some even going pro. Their stories were displayed on massive screens around the venue. The obstacles they'd overcome, the mentors who believed in them, the futures they were building. As I stood at the podium looking out at hundreds of faces, I spotted a familiar one in the front row. Tyler Jensen, now a grown man with the confident posture of someone who knows his place in the world. Next to him sat his mother, looking years younger without the weight of constant financial stress. After the ceremony, Tyler made his way through the crowd. We hadn't seen each other in person since I'd left Pinewood. He'd grown taller, broader, but his smile was exactly the same. He introduced me to his fiancée and told me about his new job. He'd been hired as a head basketball coach at our old rival school, ironically enough. We found a quiet corner away from the crowd, and that's when he handed me a small box. Inside was a whistle. Not just any whistle, but an exact replica of the one I'd worn for 15 years at Pinewood. Only this one was silver with an inscription, "To the coach who changed everything." I'm not too proud to admit I got emotional. In that moment, all the Nike contracts and TV appearances and book sales faded away. What mattered was standing right in front of me, a young man whose life had taken a different path because someone had noticed he needed help and did something about it. He told me that without those shoes, without that moment of kindness, he might have given up. Basketball had been his only way out of Pinewood, his only shot at college. And now, he was paying it forward, looking out for kids the way I had looked out for him. On the flight home that night, I thought about how strange life's journey can be. I'd spent years feeling like a failure for being just a coach, while my siblings built impressive careers and bank accounts. I'd been fired and humiliated for doing what I thought was right. I'd hit rock bottom, applying for warehouse jobs and eating microwave dinners alone. And somehow all of it, every setback, every criticism, every moment of doubt, had led me exactly where I was meant to be, not because of the success or recognition, but because of the impact. Because a kid who couldn't afford basketball shoes now had a college degree and was changing other kids' lives. That's the thing about coaching that my family never understood. The scoreboard only matters for a day. The trophies eventually collect dust. The real victories are the ones you might not see for years. The lives that go in different directions because of a moment when someone believed in them. As that plane carried me across the night sky, I realized I'd finally won the most important game of all. Not on a court, but in the moments when it mattered most. And no amount of family approval or Nike contracts could ever mean more than that silver whistle now hanging around my neck.